On the early morning of October 6th, 2025, as the first rays of sunlight crept through the narrow alleyways, the streets of Yangon, Myanmar were already bustling with daily life. The hum of motorcycle engines blended with the sharp calls of street vendors, creating a familiar symphony that anyone living in this city would recognize. But just outside the Beautyland Hotel on 32nd Street, an unusual commotion was beginning to spread. At first, only a few people stopped, but that number quickly grew to over a dozen passers-by. They all stood frozen in the middle of the crowded street, their faces turned upward, their eyes seemingly hypnotized and fixed on a single point on the 5th floor of the building. There, on a narrow concrete ledge squeezed between gray air conditioning units, hung a blue plastic bag, suspiciously bulging. The bag was both large and bizarre, with a shape so distorted and abnormal that anyone who looked at it couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. But what truly made people's hair stand on end was that the mouth of the bag had been torn open with a large hole. And from that tear, a section of a deathly pale human arm protruded, hanging limp and motionless in the air. The morning breeze blew past, carrying with it the pungent smell of blood mixed with the stench of rotting decay that drifted down to street level. That ghastly odor hit the nostrils of those standing below, causing everyone who caught a whiff to shudder with chills, goosebumps rising all over their bodies in unspeakable horror. Almost simultaneously with the passers-by discovering this terrifying anomaly, inside the Beautyland Hotel, a cleaning staff member going about his daily rounds of checking each floor happened to spot the suspicious blue plastic bag. In an instant, when he realized that what was hanging on the 5th floor balcony was no ordinary object, he became so frightened that his face turned pale and his limbs trembled. He rushed off in a panic to find the manager and report the situation. As soon as the hotel received the information, they immediately called the police. The passers-by gathered below also pulled out their phones one by one to report the incident, causing the police hotline to ring continuously. At exactly 10:20 that morning, police from the Batatang district, along with officers from the Criminal Investigation Department, quickly arrived at the scene with full professional equipment. They immediately established a security perimeter, completely sealing off the hotel's 5th floor. The fire department was also dispatched, urgently setting up a tall aerial ladder to assist with the examination at the hard-to-reach location outside the balcony. The atmosphere at the scene was thick with tension. Everyone was extremely anxious, their hearts pounding in their chests, desperately wanting to know what exactly was inside that mysterious plastic bag. Crime scene investigators began climbing up the tall aerial ladder to reach the plastic bag hanging suspended among the air conditioning units. Once they reached their target, with hands wrapped in rubber gloves and the utmost caution of professionals, they slowly cut the rope tightly binding the bag's opening. The entire scene seemed to hold its breath in that moment. And then, when the plastic bag was opened, even the veteran officers with years of experience couldn't help but take a deep breath, their throats tightening at the sight before their eyes. Inside the bag was the body of a young woman, but no longer intact. Her body had been ruthlessly cut into 3 separate pieces. The clothes on the victim had long been soaked through with blood, dyed a dark red, nearly black. Across the body were countless knife wounds crisscrossing everywhere, both numerous and deep, as if the killer had unleashed an uncontrollable fury upon the victim. But what truly made those present break out in goosebumps, their spines running cold even more than what they had already seen, was that a portion of the internal organs from the victim's abdominal cavity had been removed, leaving a horrifyingly empty space. The flesh of her left thigh had also been cut away from her body with chilling precision, as if performed by someone with clear intent rather than in a sudden fit of madness. The edges of the cuts were terrifyingly clean and sharp. After conducting a preliminary examination at the scene, the forensic team made an initial assessment that this female body belonged to a young woman between 20 and 25 years old, and she had most likely been murdered sometime the previous night. After completing evidence collection outside the balcony, investigators began entering room 502, identified as the primary crime scene. And what they witnessed upon stepping through the door was many times more horrific than what they had seen outside. The room appeared to have just experienced a bloody nightmare. Blood spatters covered the floor and surrounding walls in every direction, with the highest streaks reaching nearly 6 feet high. However, alongside the intact bloodstains, many other traces clearly showed signs of someone having deliberately wiped them away, leaving smeared and blotchy marks on the wall and floor surfaces. Particularly noteworthy was a continuous drag mark extending from the middle of the room all the way out to the balcony, clearly imprinted on the tile floor. This trail revealed an undeniable truth. An extremely violent struggle had once taken place here between the victim and the killer. After the victim collapsed, her body had been roughly dragged from inside the room out to the balcony, and it was there that the corpse was stuffed into the blue plastic bag. In the bathroom, the drain showed clear signs of having been rinsed multiple times, but the amount of blood that had been spilled was simply too great to completely cover up or wash away. On the table in the room sat a bottle of hotel-brand cleaning solution, nearly completely empty. All these details showed that the killer had made great efforts to clean up and destroy evidence after committing the crime. Yet the massive amount of blood had already seeped deep into every crack in the floor, soaking into every fiber of wood and gap between tiles. From the methodically brutal murder technique to the frighteningly calm yet somewhat clumsy cleanup behavior afterward, to the choice of hiding the body among the fifth-floor air conditioning units, everything pointed to one conclusion. This was absolutely not a crime committed in a momentary loss of control, but rather a sick murder that had been planned and premeditated long in advance. The killer, the person behind this heinous crime, had likely imagined and rehearsed the murder scenario in his mind countless times before actually carrying it out. His act of hanging the body-containing plastic bag in such a half-hidden, half-exposed position also raised many puzzling questions. At first glance, this action appeared to be an attempt to hide the victim's corpse from others' view. But upon closer consideration, the killer didn't seem to actually intend to conceal his crime for long or thoroughly. Did he want the body to be discovered? Or was this simply the carelessness of a mentally unstable individual? And an even more important question continued to haunt the minds of those involved in the investigation. Who exactly was this unfortunate young woman? Why did she have to endure such cruel, savage treatment? Very quickly, the first question found its answer. Through cross-referencing hotel registration information with other data sources, investigators identified the victim. Her name was Sue Miat Win, and according to records, she had rented room 502 at the Beautyland Hotel and had been staying there continuously for several days before the tragedy occurred. This young woman had just turned 23 years old. Sue Miat Win was born and raised in a small village in Natalin Township, located in Bago Province, Myanmar. Her family was poor, materially lacking in many ways, but filled with love. In the eyes of her family members, Sue Miat Win was a bright, quick-witted girl who was extremely devoted to her parents, always full of longing and fierce belief in a better life waiting ahead. In the words of friends who had been close to her, Sue Miat Win appeared as an equally intelligent and resilient girl with burning dreams. She radiated the powerful vitality of youth, relentless passion, and eager curiosity to explore the wider world. Like so many other young women born and raised in Myanmar's impoverished rural areas, Sue Miat Win harbored burning dreams of a brighter future in her heart. She left her hometown and arrived in the bustling city of Yangon. She hoped that in this, the country's largest city, she would find more opportunities to change her fate and help her parents and family escape poverty to live a better, more comfortable life. But reality was far more harsh and cruel than the naive young girl had imagined. In this strange and bustling city, where she had no relatives, no connections, and no support whatsoever, Sue Miat Win's life quickly became increasingly difficult, and nothing like she had hoped. Unable to find stable employment, the young woman ultimately could only make a living by selling her youth and beauty. Even so, Sue Miat Win persisted in pursuing the educational path she had chosen, diligently studying nursing and healthcare knowledge. In her heart, she always harbored the hope that after completing her courses, once she had the necessary qualifications and skills, she could find honest work at a nursing home. From there, she would gradually rebuild her life on a more solid and respectable foundation. But fate can be so cruel. No one in this world, including Sue Miat Win herself with all her plans and aspirations, could have imagined that a tragic ending had already been arranged by merciless destiny. A brutal and inhumane murder descended like an unexpected storm, mercilessly snatching away all the dreams, hopes, and efforts she had nurtured and worked so hard to cultivate. When her family received the devastating news from the police, they immediately sank into an indescribable, bottomless grief. Her elderly parents, who had poured all their love and life's hopes into their only daughter, completely collapsed both physically and mentally upon hearing the terrible news. They could not accept the cruel truth that their beloved daughter had now departed forever in such a wrongful, painful, and agonizing manner. As soon as the victim's identity was confirmed, the investigators in charge of the case immediately focused intensely on finding and apprehending the killer. They promptly began interviewing everyone at the Beautyland Hotel one by one, from the reception staff, room service workers, and security guards to the guests staying there. And that meticulous interview process quickly yielded extremely valuable information. Among those questioned, quite a few reported that on the night of the incident, they had witnessed Sumayat Win walking into the fateful room 502 together with a young man. According to witness accounts, both of them appeared natural and relaxed at the time, talking and laughing with each other as if they had known each other for a long time. They looked no different from an ordinary couple, with absolutely no suspicious signs that would draw anyone's attention. With this crucial information, the leads in the case suddenly became clearer than ever. Simply finding the mysterious man who had entered room 502 with the victim that night would essentially allow them to identify the killer who had savagely murdered Sumayat Win. Following the witness interviews, investigators turned to examining the hotel's security camera system. They sequentially extracted and carefully reviewed footage from all cameras installed in and around the Beautyland Hotel. However, this task proved to be far from simple. The hotel's surveillance system was quite outdated, having not been properly upgraded or maintained for many years. The coverage of the cameras was also very limited, unable to record all areas of the hotel. Worse still, footage from some cameras was blurry and grainy, with details impossible to make out, and there were numerous blind spots the cameras couldn't capture. Faced with these technical difficulties, the investigation team had to call in image analysis experts for support. After many hours of painstaking work, they finally pieced together a relatively complete timeline of what had occurred around room 502 on that fateful night. According to what the cameras captured, on the evening of October 5th, Sumayat Win and that young man entered the Beautyland Hotel together. This was also the last time the young woman's image appeared on the surveillance system while she was still alive. Later, when night had fallen, after Sumayat Win had most likely already been murdered, cameras recorded another young woman quietly entering room 502 alone. With this unexpected discovery, investigators immediately classified both the mysterious man and woman as key suspects requiring urgent tracking. Through relentless effort, the case finally achieved a crucial breakthrough. Although Sumayat Win's mobile phone had not been found at the crime scene or anywhere in the hotel, law enforcement refused to give up. They urgently initiated the necessary legal procedures to request that mobile carriers and related service providers extract all communication data, call history, and internet activity associated with the victim's phone number and accounts during the period before her murder. The information gathered from this data source truly opened up an entirely new avenue of investigation. Through careful analysis, they discovered that in the period before she completely lost contact, Sumayat Win had frequently used the Telegram messaging app and had been exchanging messages with an unknown account through a channel called Leader on the platform. In the recovered conversations, a man had proactively reached out and offered to pay a sum of money in exchange for a private meeting with her. After some back-and-forth messaging, the victim agreed to accept this offer, and both parties arranged to meet on October 5th at the Beautyland Hotel. As soon as they obtained this crucial lead about the suspect, the investigation team began conducting a thorough analysis of the metadata from the account linked to the Leader channel, including tracing the IP address the account had used to log in to determine the location and true identity of the person behind this mysterious account. Simultaneously, they cross-referenced the collected data with public information from other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and online forums. Very quickly, they narrowed down to a suspicious IP address frequently active in a public area of Dagon Township within Yangon City. When they carefully compared this information with the suspect's image that had been extracted and enhanced from the Beautyland Hotel's security camera system, investigators finally successfully confirmed the true identity of the mysterious man. Not stopping there, by tracing through the male suspect's social network, police also quickly identified the young woman who had entered room 502 late that night after the murder had already taken place. Before dawn on October 7th, a large-scale arrest operation was deployed secretly and swiftly. A mere 24 hours after the case was discovered, two elite police teams split into two directions, simultaneously departing to different locations to apprehend the suspects before they had any chance to flee. The first team quickly raided a location in Dagon Township and successfully arrested the primary male suspect. His name was Angkant Kia Zin. At the same time, the second team made an arrest in Bahan Township, just a few kilometers away, bringing in the female suspect who was also his girlfriend, named Amin Aung. Both Angkant Kiazin and Amin Aung had just turned 18 years old. Looking at their faces, anyone could see the youthful, innocent appearance that made it hard to believe they could be connected to such a brutal and horrific murder case. And when police carried out the arrests, both remained strangely calm, showing no resistance, struggle, or panic whatsoever. Immediately after completing arrest procedures, police thoroughly searched Kant Kayazin's residence to collect additional evidence. Among the items seized was the outfit he had worn on the night of the crime. These clothes still bore dried bloodstains that had soaked deep into the fabric. Through meticulous DNA testing and comparison at the laboratory, results confirmed with certainty that these bloodstains matched the victim's DNA perfectly. Additionally, police discovered and seized 3 mobile phones hidden in the residence. Upon examination, they confirmed that one of them was the phone belonging to Sumayat Win. During initial interrogation, under the pressure of undeniable evidence, Kant Kayazin confessed and guided police to the location where he had disposed of the murder weapons. Following his statement exactly, the investigation team conducted a search and retrieved 2 sharp cleavers from the river. Forensic examination of these 2 knives confirmed the presence of Sumayat Win's DNA, closing the door on any remaining doubt. There was no longer any question. Kant Kiazin was the one who had committed this savage murder. Carrying minds full of unanswered questions, investigators began interrogating both suspects. What exactly was the reason? What was the motive that drove them to act so cruelly and savagely against Sumayat Win? But as Kant Kiazin's testimony gradually emerged in the interrogation room, everyone present, from experienced investigators to recording officers, was stunned, speechless. A chilling sensation spread throughout the room as they listened to what this 18-year-old recounted. He used a tone that was almost coldly calm, even monotonous, as if describing yesterday's weather, to describe bloody details and unimaginable acts of brutality that made listeners' skin crawl. But the most frightening thing was that Kant Kiazin himself, while recounting all these horrific things, showed not the slightest trace of emotional disturbance. According to Kant Kiazin's matter-of-fact testimony, throughout the many months prior, perhaps even longer, he had been uncontrollably immersed in a world of violent videos, brutal video games, and especially foreign films about extreme crime, serial killings, and savage acts. He would watch the criminal plots depicted in these works over and over without getting bored, studying them meticulously down to the smallest details. Gradually, over time, he sank deeper and deeper into that dark pit, his psychology becoming increasingly sick and distorted in a frightening way. At some point, he began to blur the fragile boundary between real life and the violent fantasy world he was drowning in. Those 2 worlds gradually merged into one within his unstable mind. And then later, when merely watching violent content through a screen was no longer enough to satisfy his growing thirst, a dark and horrifying intention began to take clear shape in his mind. The intention to imitate what he had watched and actually commit crimes in real life. He wanted to personally experience, to carry out with his own hands the entire criminal process he had only witnessed through screens. And so, with this dark intention clearly formed in his mind, he began systematically planning to execute his crime. He used the leader channel on the Telegram platform to proactively contact Sumayat Win, cleverly disguising himself as an ordinary customer seeking entertainment services. With a polite demeanor and unsuspecting messages, he completely concealed his true face and the dark intentions hidden within. After some back and forth and negotiating a price, they agreed to meet on October 5th at the Beautyland Hotel for the paid encounter they had discussed. Sumiyat Win had absolutely no awareness or any guard against the deadly danger awaiting her. To her, this was just an ordinary appointment like many before. She couldn't have known that she was walking step by step into a death trap that the cold-blooded killer had set and waited for long in advance. When both entered room 502 and the door closed behind them, Kant Kaya Zin patiently waited for his opportunity, like a predator stalking its prey. And then, seizing the moment when Sumayat Win was completely off guard and defenseless, he suddenly pulled out the knife he had prepared in advance and frantically lunged at the poor young woman, stabbing and slashing brutally. Sumayat Win likely tried to resist, screaming for help in desperation, but all efforts were futile against the murderous frenzy of the perpetrator. After confirming the victim had completely stopped breathing, Kant Kiazin dragged her lifeless body into the bathroom to dismember it. Even more horrifically, he cut off a portion of the victim's thigh muscle and threw it into the toilet. After completing the murderous act and savage dismemberment, Kant Kiazin looked around room 502, which had now become a true sea of blood. He realized that with such a massive amount of blood, he alone could hardly clean it all up in time without being discovered. So without any hesitation, he pulled out his phone and called his girlfriend Ayman Aung, demanding she come to the Beautyland Hotel immediately to help him. Ayman Aung, upon receiving the late-night call from her boyfriend, quickly arrived at the hotel. And what defies understanding is that when standing before such a horrific, blood-soaked crime scene, she didn't call the police or at least run away. Instead, she calmly set about helping her boyfriend clean up the crime scene. The two quickly divided up the work. One bent down to wipe up the pools of congealed blood on the floor, while the other cleaned the blood spatters from the walls. They also used the bathroom faucet to rinse away the most stubborn blood stains. After the cleanup was somewhat complete, both of them together stuffed Sumayat Win's dismembered body into a large blue plastic bag, then together dragged it out to the balcony. There, they lifted the bag onto the narrow concrete ledge between the air conditioning units, hoping to hide the body in that out-of-sight location. Perhaps they wanted to use that elevated, hard-to-access position to conceal their crime. After leaving the scene, Kant Kiazin took some of the victim's internal organs and casually threw them into a roadside trash can. As for the two knives used as murder weapons, he took them to a bridge and threw them into the river below. After arresting the suspects, police conducted an investigation into Kant Kiazin's background and daily life, and what they discovered surprised many. Before the horrific incident occurred, those around him had seemingly never realized that this young man harbored such a dark and sick side. Completely unlike Sumiyat Win's impoverished background, Aung Kant Kiazin was born and raised in a well-off family belonging to Myanmar's educated middle class. Both his parents were doctors, and his mother even held the high position of head of the obstetrics and gynecology department at a hospital. In the eyes of those around him, Kant Kiazin appeared as a quiet, introverted, and somewhat isolated young man who rarely interacted with others. Absolutely no one could have suspected that behind that bland, harmless exterior, his inner world concealed thoughts so twisted, dark, and sick to such a terrifying degree. The police's in-depth investigation subsequently confirmed the truthfulness of Aung Kant Kiazin's testimony about his addiction to violent online content. When technical experts extracted and analyzed his web browsing and video viewing history from his electronic devices, the data showed he had been addicted to violent video games and continuously consuming films with extreme criminal themes for a very long time. Moreover, he displayed an abnormal, almost pathological obsession with the subject of violence. Some people believed that Kant Kiazin, though born into a well-off family, lacked close attention and supervision from his parents, lived disconnected from reality and withdrawn into the virtual world, making him very susceptible to being led astray by harmful information and toxic content flooding the internet onto a path of no return. In truth, this heartbreaking tragedy was likely not caused by any single factor, but rather resulted from a complex combination of different factors acting together over time. Although Ang Kant Kiao-zin was born into a well-off family with both parents being doctors with social status, it seems that material abundance could not compensate for the emotional and psychological deficits he endured. His parents were often busy with hospital work, leaving them rarely with real time to be by their son's side. Because of this, they failed to recognize in time the dangerous psychological changes silently occurring during his development, and naturally could not intervene or correct things before everything went too far. Additionally, according to some experts, Kant Kiao-zin may have suffered from deep-seated psychological disorders that were never properly diagnosed or treated. After the horrific incident occurred and the killer's identity was widely publicized, a photo of Aung Kant Kiao-zin with a young woman at a charity donation event quickly spread across social media platforms. Many netizens who saw this photo hastily concluded that the girl appearing next to him was Aman Aung. However, the truth was otherwise. The girl in that charity photo was actually Kant Kiao-zin's ex-girlfriend. And after the case was exposed, this girl revealed that while she was in a romantic relationship with Kant Kiao-zin, he had shown concerning violent tendencies. That was why she had decided to break up with him. Many netizens who had known or attended school with Kant Kiao-zin also began speaking out, saying he had been a problem student that no one dared to confront or manage. He had even brazenly brought a knife to school. Eventually, he was expelled after attacking a female student. Those revealing this information added that Kant Kiao-zin's mental state had clearly been abnormal. He could talk about violence casually without any hesitation or fear in his tone. More frighteningly, Kant Kiao-zin had used the small knife he always carried with him to threaten friends whenever there were conflicts or disagreements. Even on Kant Kiao-zin's public social media accounts, countless signs of his extreme behaviors and thoughts could be found. Perhaps because he was born into a well-off family and had never worried about or lacked money from childhood to adulthood, he had written on his profile an arrogant and contemptuous statement. "Money can't buy happiness. Poor people always say that, but that's because they can't afford it." Additionally, he displayed concerning retaliatory and harassing behaviors in cyberspace. When a girl he had secretly loved for many years rejected his feelings, rather than accepting it, Kant Kiao-zin publicly posted both her name and photos on social media as a form of retaliation and humiliation. Most notably, he had once posted an image of a paper doll nailed to a cross with burning candles beside it. Accompanying this eerie image was a chilling caption in which he expressed his desire to personally experience what the image suggested, a clear sign that dark obsessions had long been deeply rooted in his mind. However, a psychologist studying this case noted that if the perpetrator's mental state were truly fragile, he would not have been able to calmly dispose of the body after killing. In everyday life, he had always maintained a normal outward appearance. Even experts found it difficult to determine whether violent media had worsened his psychological distortion or whether such content had merely served as an outlet for the sick emotions already festering within him. Beyond the questions surrounding the main perpetrator, something equally puzzling and concerning was the true role of the young woman Aman Aung in this entire case. Although initial investigation results showed she did not directly participate in the murder or dismemberment, when she received the late-night call from her boyfriend and arrived at the scene to witness that horrific sight, she showed no fear whatsoever, never thought of calling the police, and without any hesitation, became an accomplice with strange composure. This behavior, by its very nature, was extremely abnormal and cannot be explained by ordinary logic. The expanded investigation later revealed that Aman Aung shared the same interest as Aung Kant Kiao-zin, a fascination with violence. Had frequent exposure to such violent content gradually made her so desensitized that she could stand before a dismembered body and calmly wipe down a crime scene as if nothing had happened? Was she ultimately coerced and threatened by her boyfriend into participating in the cover-up, or did she voluntarily, even willingly, do so? Because for someone to accept and aid such cruel acts, that in itself carries profound and concerning psychological significance. It suggests either that she had been psychologically manipulated to the point of losing the ability to distinguish right from wrong, or that within her also existed psychological issues, no less serious than her boyfriend's. However, all these questions are still being investigated by authorities. After this shocking case was exposed, many civil society organizations and social activist groups in Myanmar spoke out forcefully, expressing outrage at this savage crime while calling for urgent changes. They demanded that social media platforms like Telegram strengthen content moderation more rigorously, blocking channels and groups that could be exploited for criminal purposes. Simultaneously, they urged the government to quickly implement stricter measures for monitoring and managing cyberspace. The Beautyland Hotel also became a focal point of public attention due to serious gaps in its security and surveillance. Many questioned how such a horrific murder could occur right within the hotel premises without anyone knowing, why screams and sounds of struggle were heard by no one. The surrounding residential community has still not been able to escape the severe psychological shock this tragedy has caused. Legally, the case has now been officially charged and entered into trial proceedings for premeditated murder. However, regardless of the final verdict, regardless of how fully justice is served, nothing can erase the pain in the victims' families' hearts. Sumayat Win, a young woman of just 23 years old, has departed forever in a wrongful and agonizing manner at the hands of a cold-blooded killer who was only 18. This tragedy leaves us with many costly lessons and deep reflections on various aspects of modern life. First is the lesson about the irreplaceable role of family in raising and accompanying children. Aung Kyaw Zin was born into a well-off family, but lacked emotional attention and connection with his parents. Material wealth can never replace parents' presence, listening, and understanding during their children's development. The psychological changes and abnormal behavioral signs in him had appeared very early, but none were detected and addressed in time. Second, this case sounds an alarm about the potential impact of violent online content on young people's psychology, especially those who already have mental health issues or lack proper guidance, and that is today's case. What are your thoughts about this brutal crime? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.